Hi guys, so I recently went through my bookshelves and weeded out all the books that I had taken home with me from little free libraries and giveaway boxes, but that I was not realistically going to read after all. Many of these were crime fiction that I had taken with me thinking that I could keep them for a rainy day for when I needed some light popcorn entertainment. But at the end of the day, when I'm in the mood for crime fiction, I can just download some on my Kindle for very little money and some that will be more interesting to me at that point. For instance, some nice romantic suspense. And another category of books that I always take home with me are modern German classics. And while I have gotten some good reads out of that, for instance, um, Heinrich Bölls Die verlorene Ehre der Katharina Blum or Martin Walsers Ein fliehendes Pferd, there were so many more books on my shelves that I took home with me almost out of a sense of obligation, but that were never really very appealing to me. And in the end, I just opted out of the obligation because, after all, not everything that is termed a classic is always worth our time. So after this little spring cleaning operation, I thought it would be nice to go through the books that I have kept and to show them to you, because I got some great catches out of these little free libraries, which, by the way, in Germany are anything but little. If I can remember to film a short clip the next time I walk past one, I'll insert it here or at the beginning of the video. So I have 25 books to show you today, and I could be showing you more, but I decided not to include books that I already talked about at length in previous hauls. So these are all new, or almost all. And I divided them up into groups. And group 1 are books that I actually had on my TBR, on my wish list, on my to-buy list, or on my to at least watch out for list. And book 1 is Just One Damn Thing After Another by Jodi Taylor. This is an adventure story about time-traveling historians, and it sounds like a less ambitious version of Connie Willis's Oxford time travel books, which I have talked about in a special dedicated video. I guess Connie Willis has spoiled me for any time traveling stories, but I think this will still be readable if you don't go in expecting too much from it, if you're just in it for the ride and for the light-hearted entertainment. Then I was incredibly lucky to find this pristine copy of A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. Total modern classic, a satirical novel about life in New York City in the 1960s, I think. Written from the point of view of a protagonist who gets laid off and then has to navigate life in New York City as a laid off person and a person looking for a new job. I've had this on my TBR list for forever, just was never sure. With satirical novels from that time, from the 1960s, it was written in the 1960s, there's always the possibility that they are not funny at all to me nowadays. And especially since this is quite a long book, I was never completely sure, but I was so happy to find this in the little free library. The big free library, I should say. And I also found a copy of The Paying Guests by Sarah Waters. And this is the Sarah Waters novel that I'm least interested in, and I probably would never have bought it. It's set in the 1920s in London, and it's about two couples who meet, and I think there is some sort of romantic crossover happening. And it just sounds altogether a little bit too I don't know, not really interesting enough plot-wise for a historical novel, and I don't really care to read about the private lives of wealthy or affluent persons in the 1920s. It just sounds so. I'd need my story to be about something more than just for rich people in South London. But since I got it for free, I took it with me, and I'm sure I'm going to read it at some point. Another very quiet story about the lives of just a handful of people is On the Black Hill by Bruce Chadwin. But this one is about the life of two twin brothers in rural Wales in, I think, the middle of the 20th century. And this is something that's interesting to me. This is something that I can get behind. So I was so happy to find this on a giveaway shelf this time. And then there's one that I've been going back and forth on whether I wanted to read it or not, or whether I wanted to buy it or not, is more to the point. And that's Washington Black by S.E. Edugyan, and the story of an enslaved black boy from Barbados. It begins in 1830. A boy who gets the chance to become an explorer after all. And I really hope that this is really as beautiful as most people that I've heard talking about it say it is, and as its Booker shortlisting promises. And the last book in this group is The Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe. Total forgotten cult classic, or almost forgotten cult classic. This one was first published in a serialized form in Rolling Stone, and it's totally Dickensian in its dimensions. And that's the reason I haven't picked it up yet, because I'm so curious about it, but it's also just a massive mountain of text. So my next group of books is crime fiction, after all. All of these books I picked up because they are kind of classics of the genre, or their respective genres. Well, yes, there are at least two genres in this pile. So here we have Postmortem by Patricia Cornwell and Killing Floor by Lee Child. Killing Floor is the first in the Jack Reacher series, which I think everybody knows at least the name of, since this movie with Tom Cruise came out, which I've heard say is quite bad. And Postmortem is the first book in the K. Scarpetta series by Patricia Cornwell, which is a series all around a mortician, is that the right word? A medical examiner, a female medical examiner, which was quite a new thing when the first book was released in, was it the late 80s, early in 1990, the first book was released. And do you always kind of stumble over the name Patricia Cornwell too? Because I think in my mind, it should either be her last name should either be Cornwall or Cromwell, but not a mixture of both of these. It's kind of my mind kind of borks every time I have to pronounce her name. Yeah, but anyway, I then have a huge pile of John LeCarré novels. The Night Manager, Our Game, The Little Drummer Girl, and The Constant Gardener. And these are on top of the two books by John le Carré that I actually bought, which are Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and A Perfect Spy. And I took them even though I've read one book by John le Carré so far, and I loathed it. I didn't even finish it. It was The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, which was his first novel, which is why I don't think that it is necessarily anything to go by, and I might still enjoy one or hopefully more of his later novels. And if you have any recommendation for what is a good place to start with John LeCarré out of the books that I just mentioned, I'd be very grateful. So again, that's The Constant Gardener, The Night Manager, Our Game, The Little Drummer Girl, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and or A Perfect Spy. My third group of books are just random lucky finds. In some cases, the books or the authors may have been on the periphery of my vision, but in some cases I hadn't even heard of the actual book yet before I found it in the books or the little free library. One of them is Collected Short Stories, Volume 3 by W. Somerset Maugham, because why not? And then I found a copy of Dusklands by J.M. Coetzee. This is his first published book, and it contains 2 novellas in which Coetzee shows a link between 2 fictional episodes that he narrates, one that takes place during the Vietnam War, and the other is the tale of an exploration by white men into the heart of the southern African continent in the 18th century and the horrors that ensue from it. And by linking these 2 episodes, I think Coetzee demonstrates the unfortunate timelessness of human cruelty and the way humans treat those that they view as less than humans. And I also found this great Penguin Black Classics copy of A Passage to India by E.M. Forster. Love E.M. Forster and his sharp and witty, yet also warm-hearted commentary on society, and how his books are always a little bit satirical without being full out farcical and just funny, but they are always touching and, just like I said, so warm-hearted as well. And this looks massive, but in true Penguin Black Classics fashion, almost a third of it are actually appendices and introduction. And then a copy of The Commitments by Roddy Doyle. I found this in a little free library, but after reading the blurb, which is just this small paragraph up here, the rest is all testimonies from people I have never heard of. After I read this, I wasn't overly interested in it, so I didn't actually take it with me and just went home without it. But the next day or the day after, I watched a video from Jean, of Jean Bookish Thoughts, where she recommended this. So I went back to the little free library the next day, and it was still there. Okay. And then I found a copy of East of the Mountains by David Guterson. He is the author of Snow Falling on Cedars, which I loved. I think it's an amazing book. And this one sounds so intriguing. I'll read you the blurb. When Dr. Ben Givens left his home in Seattle, heading east with his Winchester and his hunting dogs in tow, he never intended to return. It was to be a journey past snow-covered mountains to a place of canyons, sagelands, and orchards, where on the verge of the Columbia River, Givens had entered the world and would now take his leave of it. What transpires was not the journey he anticipated. And the New York Times calls it ravishing, so I had to take this home with me. And I found a copy of Soul Mountain by Gao Xingjing, the Nobel laureate, and this tells the stories of several people who are all independently of each other on a pilgrimage to this Soul Mountain each of them for reasons of their own. And this is set in contemporary China, or contemporary to when it was written, at least. And the last book in this group is The Wall of Ice, The Ice Wall by Yasushi Inoue. This is the German translation of a Japanese novel, which I don't think has been translated into English. Only very few of Yasushi Inoue's works have been translated into English. But this one has definitely been translated into French and Italian, I think, besides German, obviously. This is the story of the aftermath of an accident that happens, a mountaineering accident, in which two friends were on a climbing trip, and there's an accident and one of them dies, ostensibly because of the malfunctioning of some of the equipment. But the thing is, both of these men, these two friends, were in love with the same woman, so there may or may not have been foul play at work. But this is not a thriller or crime fiction. I mean, I actually picked up two other novellas by Yasushi Inoue after I found this one in the Little Free Library, because I was curious about him, but I didn't want to pick up this long book with very small print in it as my first book by him, so I bought two novellas instead. But knowing him, this isn't going to be a cheap psychological thriller or just a murder mystery, but rather a look into the psyche of these men, and probably a look at Japanese society of the time in which it is set too. And my last group of books are all German books, and I could have put any of these books in one of the other categories as well, but I decided to leave them all together. The first one I got from a giveaway box, it's Tannöd by Anna-Maria Schenkel, and this is based on the true story of a murder case in which all the inhabitants of an isolated farm were found dead. And the interesting thing about this is that it's written from the perspective of the murderer, whose identity is not revealed though, because it's first-person narration. I expect it will be revealed at the end of the book though. And I was lucky enough to find this great hardcover copy of Ging, Gegangen by Jenny Erpenbeck, which has been translated into English. Go Went Gone is the title. And this is a story about immigration and about the lives and the situation and the plight of immigrants. And I've been so interested in Jenny Erpenbeck's work for a while, but since it's a German book, I wasn't really prepared to spend any money on it. And I now also have a modest Hermann Hesse collection. I found these 3 Surkamp editions, in addition to the 2 books of his that I already owned and have read, which are Siddhartha and Damian. And after reading those 2, I thought that I might be through with Hesse now. Not because I disliked them, on the contrary, I especially liked Damian. But on the other hand, it's not like they incited a deep, abiding love inside of me. So I never felt particularly compelled to pick up the 2 books of his that I'm most interested in now, which are the Glass-Bead game, which I've been curious about for so long, but it is quite a long book. And in this edition, again, the print is tiny and it's just massive walls of text throughout. But I know that not having this book and not being in a position to pick it up when the mood strikes me would have bugged me for forever. So I'm very glad that I found this copy. And I also found Narziss and Goldmund, which, to be honest, is the one of his that I'm least interested in. The one that I'm most interested in, beside the Glassbead game at this point, is Wolfe. But of course, this is more or less the only book of his that I've never seen in a little free library. The third book that I took is a collection of fairy tales, or just weird and fantastical tales by him. So this will be my task, I think, for the coming month, to see if I can find a copy of Steppenwolf in one of the little free libraries and all the many giveaway boxes in my vicinity. And my last book for today is my crowning achievement, probably, in book hunting. It's a hardcover collector's edition copy of Christmas in the Wild West by Karl May. If you're German or German speaking, you will immediately know why this is hilariously funny. If not, Karl May wrote a huge number of very melodramatic and romanticizing novels set in the Wild West, but they are romanticizing not in the sense that they are apologetic or that they glorify the homesteaders and the behavior of the European Americans, but on the contrary, the stories are almost always freedom fights. The only really problematic thing about it is, well, the only one that I remember is that there is always a great deal of white saviorism going on. I took this with me out of a sense of nostalgia, but also because I could not leave a book in the little free library that is called Christmas in the Wild West, and that was written by Karl May. I just couldn't. And of course, I'm going to save this for Christmas, and it's going to be such a great self-ironic reading experience. I can't wait for Christmas this year. So these are all the books that I got from little free libraries lately and that I've kept. In my defense, I put books in there myself all the time too, and especially since the Oxfam shops have been closed for the last year and a half, and little free libraries are more or less the only way that I can get rid of all the bad books that I've read and that I don't want to keep. So I am now going to try and put these books back into their right spots on the shelves. As always, if you've read any of the books that I showed you today, I'd love to hear what you thought about them in the comments. And I'll see you very soon again with another video. Bye!